Mysteriously mutilated hikers, bombs made from seashells, a cyborg kitten? Ah, the Cold War. What a terrifyingly wacky time. Here are 5 stories from the Cold War era ranked from "that's hard to believe" to "no way that happened." Number 5. The invincible Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro, the communist leader of Cuba, was a central figure in the Cold War, siding with the Soviets and overall being a giant pain in the ass for the United States. So it shouldn't come as much of a surprise to hear that the United States government tried to assassinate him over 600 times. But what is surprising is that Castro survived every single attempt. So why did the US want him gone so badly? Well, after developing extreme leftist political views in college and participating in rebellions against right-wing governments throughout the Caribbean and South America, Castro eventually played a key role in the Cuban Revolution, seizing total control of the country in 1959 and turning it into a communist state. And if you hadn't heard, Uncle Sam isn't too fond of communism. Add to that the fact that Cuba allowed the Soviets to place nuclear missiles on Cuban soil, less than 100 miles from Florida, and you have a pretty good idea why the US saw Castro as a naughty troublemaker. What's maybe even crazier than the fact that the CIA tried to assassinate Castro over 600 times are all the wacky ways they tried to do it. I mean, I guess when you find yourself trying your 578th best idea to unalive someone, you're starting to scrape the bottom of that idea barrel. Some of the classics include poisoning his cigars with a deadly, paralyzing neurotoxin, implanting tiny explosives into seashells and carefully placing them in areas where Castro loved to scuba dive, and lining his actual scuba suit with tuberculosis. At one point, seemingly frustrated by how good Castro was at staying alive, the CIA even tried to place a toxic substance called thallium salt in his shoes so that all of his hair and his iconic beard would fall out, resulting in a quote, loss of virility. Because as the saying goes, if you can't kill the guy, at least you can stop him from getting laid. Needless to say, none of these plots ever saw any success, and Iron Man Castro lived until the ripe old age of 90 before dying from natural causes. Number 4. MKUltra, aka the Mind Control Project. This one is perhaps one of the most extreme conspiracy theories that actually turned out to be true. MKUltra began with the goal of developing new ways to psychologically weaken enemies and coerce confessions during interrogations. On paper, this seems like your standard shady military hijinks, but the mission itself isn't the crazy part. Terrifyingly, a large percentage of the test subjects in MKUltra were unknowing and therefore technically unwilling US citizens. During the Cold War, double agents, backstabbing, and paranoia were at an all-time high throughout the country. So, how do you convince a paranoid citizen to partake in an unconventional and potentially dangerous experiment? You just don't tell them. The experiments done on American citizens as part of MKUltra fall primarily into one of 2 categories, which sometimes overlapped: drug use and interrogation. Members of the CIA aimed to influence their subjects by way of manipulating their behavior, thoughts, and even memories. They used hypnosis during interrogations as a way to try and make the test subjects more suggestible, and even called on professional hypnotists and psychologists to help them. Other methods that they employed were sensory deprivation, isolation, and verbal abuse. Now, you may be asking, why would these researchers agree to work on such an ethically questionable project? Easy. They were also in the dark about the true nature of the testing, and didn't know that these people were being experimented on without consent. On top of the brutal interrogation experiments, the crazier part of MKUltra was the CIA administering psychedelic drugs to people without telling them. The CIA wanted to discover how different drugs could alter someone's mental state, again hopefully leading to increased suggestibility and mind control. While several drugs, including heroin, meth, and morphine were used, the CIA had a particular fascination with LSD, which was given to, among others, college students and professors, hospital patients, prisoners, and even US military soldiers. These people would either be told that they were contributing to mental health research, or they wouldn't be told anything at all. The CIA would then monitor how the drugs affected their mental states and physical performance. At some point during the experiment, I guess the researchers got bored of their standard American test subjects, so they started giving members of the CIA LSD without their knowledge or consent. People in the agency running the experiment were unwilling participants in their own experiment. Needless to say, once news of MKUltra became public knowledge in the 1970s, it led to widespread anger and even congressional action. Number 3. German teenager flies himself into Moscow. On the evening of May 28, 1987, Russian pedestrians deep in the heart of Moscow watched a tiny single-engine airplane make a surprise landing on a bridge near the Red Square. Authorities and citizens stared nervously at the doors, waiting to see who or what would be crazy enough to land a plane here. Was it an American super soldier sent to destroy communism once and for all? A time traveler with a dire warning from the future? Nope. It was a scrawny German teenager named Matthias Rust, clutching a 20-page manifesto for world peace. Matthias's journey to Russia was an unbelievable, unauthorized, most likely illegal, flight through several countries' airspaces and military defenses. So, how did he do it? Matthias Rust was a West German teenager who, like all teenagers, believed that he was destined for greatness. Particularly, the 19-year-old Rust felt the de-escalation of the Cold War was obviously up to him. So, on May 13, 1987, Rust took his small, rented airplane, a Cessna 172 Skyhawk, and left his home city in Germany, flying throughout Northern Europe, visiting Denmark, Norway, and Iceland, before eventually refueling in Helsinki, Finland, on May 28th. Rust later said that these earlier flights around Northern Europe in the preceding days and weeks had been to test out his piloting skills. In Helsinki, Rust told air traffic control that he was heading to Stockholm, Sweden, but shortly after taking back off, he turned his plane sharply east and went off course. Air traffic tried to contact him to warn him that he was getting dangerously close to the heavily trafficked air route between Helsinki and Moscow. But Rust, like a grandma who's trying to concentrate when driving in an unfamiliar area, turned off all communication systems and ignored them. At this point, things got crazy. Let's count the number of times Rust escaped death due to sheer luck or Soviet error. After crossing into Soviet airspace, he was picked up on radar and was sent a request to declare himself as friend or foe. He ignored it, and multiple air defense battalions had missiles tracking his aircraft, but they failed to gain clearance to shoot him down. 2 interceptor planes were sent out, and while one pilot actually spotted Rust's plane, it was mistaken for a similar-looking Soviet model, and the Soviet pilot assumed it posed no threat and turned around. At one point, Rust was incorrectly labeled as a friendly aircraft as a result of inexperienced air control officers. At another, it was believed he was part of a Soviet search and rescue team that was active on another mission. He was then spotted multiple other times and given incorrect friendly designation twice. I mean, come on guys, for God's sake. Rust even had a West Germany flag and registration number on the airplane. Rust eventually made it to Moscow, landed by the Kremlin, and was promptly arrested after signing a few autographs. While he didn't get to hand-deliver his manifesto, Rust's stunt had significant political repercussions, the biggest of which was the embarrassment that this caused to the Soviet military. Their entire national air defense was bested by a teenager. A teenager with only 50 hours of flying time. Did I mention that? That's like a little over 2 days in the air. Matthias Rust was barely a pilot. The resulting humiliation led to the firing of several high-ranking Soviet military commanders, and is believed to have contributed to Soviet leadership beginning to value openness and transparency, beginning to thaw the relations between the East and West. I know I wouldn't want to be in that meeting. Number 2. The Acoustic Kitty Project. Okay, hear me out. A top-secret spy microphone, but shaped like a cat. During the Cold War, the number one priority for the United States was staying one step ahead of the Soviet Union. This was achieved in many ways, but none as adorable or hilariously tragic as the Acoustic Kitty Project, which was a CIA initiative that aimed to turn cats into mobile surveillance devices. The idea itself made perfect sense. Perfect sense. Get it? Sorry. The CIA wanted to use cats to spy on Soviet happenings because of course they did. The thinking was if they could just mod cats with some surveillance equipment and then train them to walk inconspicuously through areas where Soviet officials were discussing business, the spy cat could capture sensitive classified information and send it right back to the US government. Just picture it. A Soviet military commander scratching a kitten behind the ears, all the while divulging his deepest secrets. We're gonna nuke the United States. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And I'm not wearing any underwear. During an hour-long procedure, a veterinarian operated on the cat and essentially turned it into a cyborg, decking it out with a small microphone, a radio transmitter, and antennae. The microphone was planted in the cat's ear canal, while the transmitter went near the base of the skull, and a thin wire ran through the cat's fur. After the procedure was complete, the next step was training the cats to walk in specific patterns that would ensure they picked up as much audio as possible without seeming too obvious. Once the cat was fully modded and had completed its top-secret Spy Academy training, it was go time. Unfortunately for Acoustic Kitty, go time lasted about 15 seconds. The CIA conducted its first field test by trying to get their secret spy cat to eavesdrop on two men sitting on a park bench near the Soviet compound in Washington, D.C. The cat was released, and as it crossed the street, it was struck and killed by a taxi. I mean, it feels messed up to laugh, but you couldn't make this up if you tried. That field test ended up being the first and the last operation of the Acoustic Kitty project. After the initial failed mission, the CIA deemed the idea impractical, citing the unpredictability of using live animals as tools of espionage. After one try and $20 million down the toilet, the idea was officially scrapped. And I thought I spent a lot of money on my cat. Number 1. The Dyatlov Incident. In 1959, a group of 9 hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, set out on an expedition in the Ural mountain range of the northern Soviet Union with the goal of reaching Otorten Mountain. A month later, all 9 would be found dead, with gruesome, inexplicable injuries, leading to a mystery that has sparked numerous theories and remains unsolved to this day. But let's back up for a second. Dyatlov and all of the hikers present with him were extremely experienced in winter trekking. They were well prepared in every aspect imaginable, and while their journey was expected to be a difficult one, by no means did anyone think it would kill all 9 hikers. A 10th member who was initially present with the group actually got sick and had to turn back shortly into the trip, a decision that, while irritating at the time, would ultimately save his life. The group left on January 23rd with the goal to reach a specific predetermined point and send a telegram confirming their return by February 12th. When the 12th came and went, concern began to grow. When the date that the entire group was set to return passed by, authorities were notified and the search for the hikers began. What they found would be a horrifying sight that remains without explanation to this day. On February 26th, authorities stumbled upon the tent that was being used by the group. It was badly damaged and even looked like it had been initially set up incorrectly. Stranger still, the tent was slashed open from the inside, indicating that the hikers had fled the tent in a frantic hurry. Footprints led from the campsite to the edge of the forest, where 2 bodies were found, barefoot and dressed only in their underwear. In the space between the tent and the forest, 3 more bodies were found. Once these were discovered, a legal investigation began that concluded the victims had died of hypothermia. The narrative was that something, maybe an avalanche or a violent animal, had forced the hikers out of their tent, and they had gotten lost in trying to flee whatever caused them to leave base camp, eventually succumbing to the cold. The discovery of the last 4 bodies, including that of Dyatlov, shifted the narrative of the entire incident, and is the reason that we still have no idea what happened out there. These last bodies were found deeper in the woods with traumatic internal injuries. 1 hiker had a broken skull, 2 others had severe chest fractures, and if that wasn't enough, 1 was missing her tongue and eyeballs. Good luck sleeping tonight. According to investigators, the injuries were sustained with a massive amount of force, equal to a car crash. However, while the internal injuries to the hikers were severe, they exhibited almost no external signs of injury, other than, the missing pieces of the face. There are many theories as to what happened to the hikers at what is now called the Dyatlov Pass. Some think an avalanche is to blame, while others think that native reindeer herders in the mountains attacked the group for encroaching on their land. One of the more terrifying theories, however, is that the Soviet military was testing out explosive weapons in the area, and the hikers got caught in the crossfire. There are reports of the Soviet Union testing parachute mines that explode in the air above their targets in the same area at around the same time. Injuries from parachute mines are similar to those sustained by the hikers. Extreme internal trauma with very little external injury. While most people seem to go to the avalanche route, there is reason for the Soviets to cover up such a nasty accident, and we'll never know for certain what happened to those hikers. No matter which theory you go with, there are enough question marks to keep you up at night. Why was the tent cut open from the inside? Why were some hikers found almost naked while some had multiple layers? Where did that lady's eyeballs go? Some questions we have to live with.